great turnout. As you know, we started off sort of the planning and envisioning process for Pittsfield Township for the first time around in 2009. And that went on for about 16 months or so, culminating in the adoption of the 2010 Pittsfield Master Plan. And some of you were part of that planning process as well. And during that time, we had identified sort of 6 dense nodes spread out in different parts of the township, as we sort of, those nodes were sort of visioned in a very macro fashion, as you can sort of see from our planning document. The next step from there that we took in 2013 was revising our zoning to provide the tools for many different things, but as well for the form-based districts, which were the 6 nodes that we had identified through the planning process. What we've been doing this year in 2014 has been, the beginning of this year, has really been going back and tweaking a lot of that work that happened. The reason we did it back over there, starting in 2009, we knew it was the Great Recession. Things were very quiet. It was a good time following a couple of decades of sort of, going with the flow sort of thing, to be more proactive and say, what kind of a community do we want to be? Who is Pittsfield Township? Who do we want to be in the future? What we want to celebrate about our community, and what we want to keep and change and that sort of stuff. So, like I said, so 2014, what we've been doing is going back and tweaking, because that was a lot of work that we did between 2009 and 2013, a lot of changes that had happened, and we had small administrative changes to do, for example, with the signage and those sort of things in our CO. Above and beyond that as well, what we started seeing in late 2013 and 2014 was what we knew would happen is the return of the development pressure, which is why back in 2009 we had done what we did, so that when the development pressures came back to the township, we had a vision, we had a plan. So when we see these development pressures coming back, like I said again, in late 2013, 2014, what is going to happen? And one of the things that we saw happen, of course, and you all are very intimately aware of that, is sort of this juxtapositioning of the vision that we had for the township to create a walkable, human-scale development, nodal growth, but then we had the developments coming in trying to retrofit into the old sort of strip mall sort of framework of development. So that started the discussion, which we kickstarted here back in, I believe it was around March of 2014, saying, well, we need to go back and rethink and retweak that part of the CO as well in our master planning process. And if some of you were here during the presentation I made at that time, we had said in terms of next steps, what we would be doing as part of that revamping, revisioning, and relooking at our documents and our parameters was to do some design workshops and charrettes for some of our nodes, especially the Ann Arbor Saline node and then the State Street node, which are the 2 nodes that have attracted the most attention and development pressure so far in the township. The rest remains to be seen. So we wanted to come back and build off of that macro vision that we have developed in the 2010 Pittsfield Master Plan to sort of drill down a little bit more to greater specificities, again, to create clear expectations for the developers as well as for the township and our residents, and then we want to do this in a consensual fashion, of course. So here we are today. We're following through. We've been doing a lot of work. The Planning Commission has as well in terms of looking at the CO and making sure that we change our form-based design requirements to expand the buffering requirements and many different things that need to sort of make sure that we're not doing changes for the sake of change. What we want to do is we want to do it in a fashion that is going to build on the quality of life that we currently have in the township and continue to make Pittsfield Township the premier destination, I believe, that we are in the region in Washington County and Southeast Michigan, for that matter. So the design charrettes here, like I said, are being kick-started today. So this is our first presentation. We have tool design in attendance today. They'll start it off with a presentation, and then we have 2 tables set up in the back, and we're going to hope that you're going to stay here today and have your feedback heard by them. They will be here again tomorrow, and I will have them, I request maybe Candace, our planners here as well, to go through the schedule of events that's planned for tomorrow and then as well for Friday. I should also mention that we are videotaping this presentation today. We will also videotape the final presentation, which is on Friday. It happens to be in the middle of the day. I know it's not the most convenient time for folks to be here. So we are going to put these presentations on our website, so folks that couldn't be here today can at least go on our website and look at it there as well. We will be making the presentation that's made on Friday with the recommendations that the consultants put together. That presentation will be made at the Board of Trustees meeting as well, so that folks have a chance to attend a public meeting as well and see the presentation. And so we'll be taking it from there. Yes, so you have your hand up.
You said that there were some people here that were involved in the planning process. I want to propose my notion that probably not a lot of people in this room were involved in the planning process.
Yes.
And that we're basically wondering why these areas were targeted for heavy development.
Okay, yeah, right. And I said some of you were. I didn't say many of you because I don't think many of you were, but I know some of you were involved. And, and to your question about how the nodes were developed or identified, we did multiple public forums.
Was it because Myers sold those buildings and they're
It was through multiple public forums, and then we did a large survey as well. I believe, I'm going by memory, but I think we had about 600 odd respondents in our survey. So there were multiple ways, and it's all delineated in our master plan. So if you go, and that's available on our website, we can get you.
But there are other space next to POSCO, bigger space, empty, and why you don't choose there?
That is one of the nodes. That is also one of the nodes. There's 6 nodes spread out in different parts of the township. But we will get to sort of, and I would redirect you really to the 2010 Pittsfield Master Plan that delineates, really walks through the whole process of the planning process and how we came to what we came to. But what we are here today, and again, which is why I'm really happy to see the attendance today, is to continue to engage with you guys. I don't think that you do something one time and then you're like, I'm done and I'm just going to keep that thing and that's it. These are living, breathing documents. That's like one of my taglines. So we are here today to make sure that these documents are responsive, are sort of taking into account what is going on at the ground level, and continue to talk to you guys, engage with you, and see where we want to go. Again, like I said, we want to drill down to greater specificities with these 2 nodes at this time at least. And so it's really going to be critical that you engage with us. I think we're blessed. We live in Pittsfield Township, which is a great community. We have a great citizenry that does get engaged and that does have their voices heard in a respectful, logical fashion. I hope that's what we do here today. I see a couple of hands up. I will respond to those. I'm just sort of kicking this off, and then I am going to request Ian Lockwood and Hannah Pritchett that are with Tool Design to come up and join me here and kick off the presentation, but I'll take the 2 questions first.
I consider the meeting Friday. Let's put it next week. I want a lot of people to be involved.
I'm sorry, the gentleman here
Okay,
has his hand
so
up.
I will
Please,
pick
let's
up.
wait on
Yes.
Yes.
We're new here,
Yes.
and I gather you don't represent Tool Design Group. Who are you? Who do you?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Yes, I hate to be presumptuous, and I was today, so thank you for catching me on that. My name is Mandy Graywal. I'm the supervisor here at Pittsfield Township, and I'm joined by Patricia Scribner, who is the treasurer here at the township as well. And we have Craig Lyon, who's our director of utilities and municipal services. We also have our senior planner, Candice Breyer, here, and our planning consultant, Ben Carlisle as well. And then, like I said, we have our 2 consultants that we brought in. They've been in Washington County. They are, one of them, I will say that she's wearing green as well. You can guess, she's from Michigan State. She's actually a Michigan native. They have both together and I think by themselves as well had considerable experience working in different parts in Michigan. I believe Ypsilanti, Detroit, Michigan, Lansing, we'll say that too, yeah. So a bunch of places, and I know the way we got involved is because one of the nodes in the township is at Washington Golf Site, and that was one of the projects that you've been doing through Washington County. So we've requested them to come in and do a design workshop here for, like I said, these 2 nodes here, and I hope that you'll participate, have your voices heard so that we can come up with a vision and a thought process for these notes that will make our community better than what it is today. So with that, Hannah and Ian, if you could please come up and get the presentation going. And Ian, if you want to walk through what the format is going to be, so folks know sort of what's going on, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ian Lockwood. I'm a tool designer, and we're a firm of about 70 people spread in offices across the country. And our specialty, what we're known for, is making places walkable and bikeable and transit friendly. We help a lot of communities with their downtowns. We work in some very large cities and some very small places. So from Chicago down to little places like Middleburg, 600 people. They all have similar issues and similar stresses, and we help them succeed with their change. All these communities are experiencing change. I imagine we all have ideas about what tonight's about. Tonight, what I'd like to do is to share with you some scripts that we developed. We're not new to Michigan, but we're new to your community. We are not experts on your area. We have some pretty good ideas about how to develop nodes and town centers and so forth, that we've done in a lot of places. And so what we're going to do over the next couple of days is to get to know the community a little bit, and then just share some thoughts with you based on experiences elsewhere. And hopefully by the end of the couple of days, they won't be naive thoughts. They'll be a little bit grounded in your context, and we hope you find them useful. Today, we had a tour of the two nodes we're talking about tonight, and so I picked out some scripts I want to share with you about what may help inform the discussions. And one of the things that we like to do at the beginning of our little shreds is to share some experiences that other communities have had, that some are larger, some are smaller, some are further along in their development, but it helps develop a vocabulary where we can discuss the nodes and communicate properly. I think one of the big challenges in these sorts of situations is this sort of communication thing. So what we'll do is I'll go through a little presentation, and I'll be sharing with you some other places and some ideas, some lessons learned that we learned in other places. Because I can't really talk about your area because I don't know it very well. But in 2 days, I think we'll have some suggestions for you to look at.
It's not enough time. 2 days is not enough time.
Oh yeah, 2 days is certainly not enough time to develop a plan. But I think in 2 days, we can show you some things that other communities have done, so you're not inventing it from scratch.
And if we don't approve, what happens?
Tell you what, I'll make you a deal. You can talk all you want afterwards when we're at the tables. But I think this, for respect of the whole crowd here, I think what we'll do is we'll do a presentation, then we'll have a question and answer and discussion in a sort of plenary form. And then you'll have all the airtime you want at the tables for specifics. Does that sound good?
We're here for 2 days straight, so if you want to talk till 2 in the morning, we're not
Yeah, we can talk all you want afterwards. So I hope these.
He has a question.
So when you talk, my understanding is that tomorrow and the day after, your schedule is in the afternoon. I think
Yes.
most people have working schedule as well. I don't think I will be able to get tomorrow and the day after.
We must reschedule.
In fact, and you know, you're right. This is not a perfect process. We're here for 2 days, and we have a lot of ideas from other places that we can share. I'd love to spend 2 months here, but there's budgets and things to consider. So we're going to do our best to share the ideas, and they're being videotaped so you can look at them later. But we'll do the best we can with the resources we have, and we'll try and make our suggestions as targeted and useful as possible. And you know, regardless of what schedule we pick, I'm sure it wouldn't be convenient for some people, but as long as we get a good sample of people and get a fairly good idea of what's happening in the community, I think we can tailor our comments and our ideas, you know, to be as helpful as possible. And then, and this process won't end with our input, but I think it might help you move forward So I'll just introduce myself a little bit more thoroughly too. Here are the two areas we're looking at: the state Elmsworth area, and we have maps at the back, which we'll go over in more detail after the presentation. And you don't have to stay for that, but if you want to, we can do that together afterwards. And then there's the Ann Arbor Saloon area.
Now, I need a little more description.
So this is I-94, right here. This is Ann Arbor Saline Road. This is Meyer. These are the two outlots that are being developed right now.
Okay.
So just so you know who's speaking, I grew up in Ottawa, Canada. I did consulting there for about 10 years. I have a bachelor's and master's in engineering from Carleton University. And I loved living in Canada because of the hockey, obviously, and skating on the canal and so forth. But my wife, I traveled a lot with my work. I say I now live in a suitcase, but we actually moved to Florida because she was sick of shoveling the driveway when I was traveling. So we now live in Florida. And I spent my youth and my first 10 years of my career bicycling. Ottawa is a very bike-friendly city, despite the freezing cold winters. And I got into the triathlons and the velodrome. I eventually invented a push bike with a propeller. It's 160 miles to the gallon, and you can go to like 25 miles an hour, which is a lot of fun. And then my vacations are usually involving cycling. So this is a Mayor's Institute. We took a group of mayors around to make them aware of issues for pedestrians and cyclists. And so my kind of passion is cycling, but we do all kinds of community design. So, and I was this is a Christmas parade, and I was the skinny Santa Claus, and the idea was that even Santa Claus going to shed a few pounds if he gets on a bicycle, and so that's what we're trying to encourage, is healthy living in this parade. And in the mid-90s, my family and I emigrated to the United States, and we moved to West Palm Beach, where I took up the position of the head of transportation for the city. And so I was responsible for all the streets and everything in the city. And my predecessors had one-wayed and sped up our streets. They were battling congestion, and to the point where the sidewalks were tiny. And they lowered the quality of life in the city, and people started leaving the city. In fact, everybody with choice left West Palm Beach and moved into the suburbs. And then those folks drove into town, and we tore down literally half of our buildings in the city to make room for surface parking lots, further eroding the city. So when we hit rock bottom, we had $7,000 in reserves for the city. We were broke. There was no development activity. And HBO did their documentary on drug abuse, called Undercover Crack USA, and they filmed it in downtown West Palm Beach. And so that's what we were famous for, was prostitution and drug dealing. And 80% of our shopping street was vacant, and the 20% that was there, was not very nice. So this is where everybody went to. They moved out of town into in a lot of what was Everglades. And this is what was left behind. So these surface parking lots, boarded up buildings, underutilized property. It's just a vacant city. And so all the white spaces is where either the buildings fell down or we tore them down, or they were made into surface parking lots. So that was the challenge. And the community in West Palm Beach was now made up of very low income, mostly African American folks, who were fed up with some things happening to the community that were beyond their control. So they wanted to do some planning so that they could get back in control of their future. And so the mayor, the planners, the business community that existed, the community got together and envisioned the city the way it ought to be, not the way it was, the way it ought to be. And I sense that's what's going on here, that you aren't a slum like we are, but you are grappling with creating a vision of the future for your township the way it ought to be in your imaginations. And we call that planning. So once we get a vision then we could put a plan together to make it into reality. One of the things that we learned in this whole exercise in West Palm Beach was that if you don't plan, things happen to your community. There's all sorts of property rights and things in the United States which allow people to do things by right. And if they're not turning out the way you like them to, you need to do something about it. And the way you do something about it, if you want to be proactive and actually shape things, is to do planning. Otherwise, what you do is called reacting, where you're constantly in a fight. And that's the situation that we've been in, that it was just a constant fight and things were happening in the community, they're out of control. So we got together, we had this huge exercise where we involved everybody in the city and came up with a vision for the future. And we define a vision as a collective consensus on how the community ought to be in the future. And we drew it, we literally drew what it should look like. And my job was to coordinate the transportation components with the land use vision. So it was the typical things you could imagine. We want a vibrant, economically successful, inclusive place where people could live, work, shop, play, all that sort of thing. And these are the streets that I inherited as the transportation person. And all of my training said that my predecessors had done this correctly. That levels of service were important, getting the traffic through, fighting congestion, all that sort of thing. But we completely destroyed the place. And so all these buildings that you're seeing here are vacant. In fact, those are literally weeds growing out of the broken window of this building. And so what we had been doing wasn't working. And so I had to change something. So this is like 1996. And before the term road diet was formed, we decided we were going to reallocate some of the space on the street. So we rebuilt it, made the sidewalks bigger, we did these raised intersections. And lo and behold, these buildings today are now occupied. These are just fast commuter routes rushing through our neighborhoods, endangering the students as they're walking to school. And so we took this street and we narrowed it, and we built a linear park along the side. So that chimney here is this chimney. And right away, people started walking, riding bikes where nobody had ever walked or ridden a bike before. And people could still drive, a lot of people still drove. But it gave people choices. And it raised the value of the area. And a lot of the boarded up homes, families moved back into them. A lot of the vacant lots, people built houses. So it started repairing the area in accordance with the community vision.
And so Ian, this is the kind of network and streetscape that you had seen in Canada. Like, it's not just because it's in Florida that it's working out. I know there's a palm tree in the picture.
Yeah, be careful when you look at these pictures, there are actually palm trees in here. Pretend they're oak trees, but the same sorts of principles that we used here were used in a couple hundred communities around the country. So we do most of our work in the States and Canada, and a lot of it is in the northern states. So here's a before and after picture of a street getting repaired. There's our one-way shopping street, which we two-way, made beautiful. This is literally where the documentary was filmed, Cracked America. There was houses with cracked beer spray painted on them, with the windows knocked out, people would drive up and buy their drugs. Anyway, so this is the before picture, and my job was to make the streets nice, and this is the after picture. So that building is this building. And so we have some housing, some restaurants, Macy's, a theater complex. So it really invigorated the city. This was an old church that had been abandoned for a long time. And that's the before picture, and that's the after picture. So we made it into a performing arts place and some public space in front of it. So the lessons that we learned, when I left the city of West Palm Beach, I became a consultant, and so I worked in a number of places, and I applied these lessons, and one of them has to do with the capacity of a street. And in my profession, transportation engineering, the capacity of a street is defined as how many cars can cross a line in an hour. But I think we all know that streets have the capacity to do lots of things. They can be great addresses for living on or for businesses. They create identity. Everybody that comes to your community identifies to it by what they experience on the streets. They can be social spaces, they can be recreational places, they're routes to school for the kids. Streets have the capacity to do all sorts of things. And we need to think of them as more like public space rather than just as car complexes. We learned about bones. We call the streets the skeleton of the city. Now, anybody recognize what that is? It's a horse, okay. Has anybody actually seen a horse skeleton? I know I haven't, but anybody know what this is? I'll give you a clue, it's a mammal. No, it's not kangaroo. It's a manatee. Now, the interesting thing about these two animals is they both breathe air, they both have kidneys, they both have warm blood, they both eat grass. But because of their bone structure, this one runs around on the ground, and this one swims around in the water. And cities have bone structures, and they have the same ingredients, just like the lungs and the kidneys and everything. Both cities have houses, they both have businesses, they both have parks, they both have all these ingredients, but they're arranged differently. Now this city, does anyone know where that is, by the way? Savannah, 10 points. There's a door prize at the end. You get a free map. So yeah, that's Savannah. Highly walkable, great access to public spaces, good access to the waterfront. If there's a crash here, or they're doing maintenance or something, there's a lot of redundant routing. Anybody know where this is? No?
No, it's not a part.
It actually doesn't really matter, does it? But,
No.
it's actually Irvine, California. So you can tell just by the image that Irvine, California is not a very nice place, just by looking at its x-ray. So if there's a collision right here, what happens? Like the whole thing shuts down, right? So depending on the bones, you can have completely different outcomes in cities. And this is your opportunity to, while you're still a relatively young community, to look at your structure of these nodes and adjust them. Because it's never going to get any easier than it is now. It's not easy now, but it's going to get harder in the future as more buildings get built. So that's one of the things that Ken and I will be looking at, is just your structure and making some suggestions about getting the bones right. Because once they're set, you have to live with them. So if you can adjust and fix things now, it's a really good idea. So I have a cartoon column, so I include some of them in the presentation, but here's a cartoon of a street network, and it's really easy to walk around, right? And here's, if you put all the lanes together, and then just had like a big intersection, it has the same number of lanes, but it's really hard to cross the street. It's kind of like going upstairs. It's kind of easy when you can do them one at a time, but you have to make big leaps, it's a little more difficult. So this is important. If you can get parallel network in your town centers, then you can share the traffic loads amongst many streets, and then each street can be more walkable and bikeable. Still carries all the cars, but in a way that you have choices on how to get around. So the size of the blocks actually affect how development happens too. With giant super blocks, you get giant development that's more of a car scale. With smaller blocks, you get a more human scale development. And then when you assign the trips to the street network, with the big blocks, all the trips have to use the one road, so that the road ends up being very automobile oriented and becomes a barrier. With a network, the same number of trips occur, but they can go into multiple routing options and spread the load. So you can get a much more what we call livable community. So here's two drawings. Just pretend for a second that this is a 6-lane street with left turn lanes, and pretend these 3 streets are 2-lane streets with left turn lanes. When you compare the car carrying capacity of the two networks, this one will always outperform this one from an automobile perspective. However, this one is also friendly for walking and cycling and so forth. So that's kind of the point about the network. And so here's just, sometimes I always feel I have to prove things, so I bring some science. So this is out of the ITE journal, the Institute of Transportation Engineers journal. So here's a 2-lane street with left turn lanes, and one through lane carries about you get 800 cars in an hour in a typical city. When you add another through lane in each direction, the marginal increase in the throughput by the second lane is much smaller. So 2 lanes going in the same direction obviously carry more than 1 lane, but it's not double. So from a taxpayer perspective, for bang for your dollar, you're much better off with a network of smaller streets than a sparse network of big streets. You can carry more traffic and it's more inclusive. So, I brought a couple of case studies. This one's smaller than your area. This one just has to do with the Home Depot. And then we'll get into some bigger ones. And it's not exactly like what you have, but it kind of frames what you have. It might give us some vocabulary to talk about it. So this is a suburban part of West Palm Beach, and just like here, you've got a big highway and an arterial road. You've got a mall. You've got some kind of big parcels, some strip centers, some intact neighborhoods. Very, very similar to what you have here. Of course, different weather and stuff, but the layout is kind of the same. And this arena, this used to all be parking for the arena, and a Home Depot came in and wanted to develop part of the parking lot. And the developer came in with the prototypical Home Depot, which didn't really give anything to the city in terms of quality of life. It was just a way to sell hammers and everything else that Home Depot sells. But we wanted something that actually contributed to the city. And again, we were a little bit out of control, and so we wanted to do some planning so that the city would get better over time as with the development pressures that were going on. So this is the Home Depot site. And what we did was we kind of looked, there's this sort of macro street network, and then we superimposed this really quick street network over top of kind of the suburban land uses to help inform what to do on the Home Depot site. And the idea was this is a river going into a lake.
Houses.
Pardon me? So this is a river into a lake, and these streets, what we're trying to do is pull the value of the river into the community, and the Home Depot site was here. But we focus in on the Home Depot site. So there's the sort of the street network that we have implied on their development. So the Home Depot building itself is up to a street. All the out parcels are up to a street. The Wendy's is up to a street. And all the utilities are built into the streets. Because we know that Home Depot is only there for 15 or 20 years, and then they'll find another site. So we wanted all the investment to actually create a block structure that adds value, residual value, once the Home Depot leaves. And you're experiencing a lot of development right now. And if you shape it towards a future, when those buildings change or so forth, you've got something left which adds value to your community. So there's all of this fast food, there's sit-down restaurants, there's gas stations, everything's up to a street. And now let's take a look at what it looks like. So this was going to be just a parking lot with aisles in it. So there's the Home Depot over here. This is the main parking lot. Those are some of the out parcels. So that, what would have been just a regular aisle between parking lots, now it looks like a street. And you can imagine if the Home Depot were to go away, you could probably pretty easily build townhouses or something there without having to rebuild everything. So that's kind of the point.
But it's very far for home owners. This is very, in the picture, the home owners, the houses are very far to this Home Depot. So we
Yeah.
are talking about residential. Can you go back a little the picture? Residential
This
are on the
is
right.
this is the last interruption that we'll tolerate, and then we'll keep all the questions to the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. These are the homes here.
Yes. Big, yeah.
But in the future, this is going to be mixed use.
I
This is
don't
rather-
think so.
Can we listen to his presentation?
Yeah, I'll do the presentation from now on, okay?
I'm going for up.
Deal?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, this will eventually be a mixed-use development. And yeah, this is a completely different situation than you have here, but there are similarities, and I think in terms of the structure and planning for the future. And what I'd like you to focus on are the commonalities, not the differences. I think we can always find differences we can disagree on, but if we want to make progress, we're never going to find an exact duplicate of your community. So what we ought to do is look at other communities and find the best ideas from them and apply them to this context, and that gets us to a constructive place. So there are some things that, lessons from here that we can take out. We wouldn't use the same plant palette, obviously, there's some other differences. But there are a lot of things that are similar. So all the buildings are up to streets, which applies to any place. So you can actually walk to them and not have to walk to parking lots. So here's your township. There's some older places like Ann Arbor and Detroit and so forth. And as you can kind of see that this area used to be like this. It was probably mostly farms, and over time, development pushed out. And we'll probably continue to do that. And so what places like this wants to do is to imagine that future in a way that is appealing to the community, as opposed to leaving all of the levers as they are. If you do no planning, whatever property rights exist and whatever plans exist, that's actually your future. It's all codified, and that will happen. And I'm kind of sensing that people don't really like that trajectory. So we need to imagine what the trajectory should be and alter the plans accordingly. So there is a march of a development happening. So either change will happen to you, or you can help shape the change, and that's kind of your choices, and that's what a lot of these.
What is the outline?
Oh, that's your boundary.
Of Pittsfield?
Yeah. That's your.
Okay, I was looking at the pink side.
So let's look at.
Ian, I just wanted to jump in real quick here. I think one of the things that I found from working in Michigan, I think Pittsfield Township is in a really, really good position right now with respect to this kind of development. If you look at some of the suburbs of the Detroit area, downriver up in Oakland County, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, those are communities that really had development happen to them and didn't really have a vision for the kinds of town centers that they wanted to develop, and so it's just a Home Depot after a Lowe's after another Home Depot. And so I think that, by going through this planning process, Pittsfield Township is really setting itself up in a way to not end up with that kind of situation. And so that's what's really exciting for us, is when you go to communities where all this stuff's already built out, and it's all based on that kind of older model of transportation engineering, it's a lot harder to go back. But we're in a position right now where we can really kind of make some, constructive suggestions about how to set that development up as it comes, and then, plan better for the future to have a really, really vibrant and exciting place to live.
Yeah, your community has the luxury of not being completely constrained and bottled in by what's already happened. You've got a little flexibility still, so now's the time to get ahead of it. Let's look at a couple of other cities that are facing these same issues. Charlottesville and Charlotte. You can see this is the old part of Charlotte, and it's growing out just like around here. And they have a plan that they call their wedge and corridor plan. And these are the corridors, these lines, and between them are what's called the wedges. And these are relatively low-density, single-family home developments. And these are the old farm-to-market roads, which these folks use to commute to their jobs and so forth. And that sort of pattern of development isn't very sustainable. It's very expensive, and it's very energy hungry and so forth. So Charlotte is developing along their growth plan. The whole strategy for the city is to grow in their centers and along their corridors. And typically, these arterial corridors have surface parked, single-story concrete block buildings along them. There's sort of a veneer protecting the neighborhoods behind them. And you'll probably see that pattern in a lot of places around here as well. And the idea here is this is where the density for these cities are going, and this is where the mixes of uses are going. And that has a couple of benefits for Charlotte, is that the folks in the neighborhoods can find what they need on these corridors, on a weekly basis, on a daily basis. They can find what they need close by. Also, it provides a density which transit becomes viable. And then Charlotte's concerned about the aging population. There's a lot of people there who are retiring and getting elderly. And they want to have housing choices in their own community when they don't feel like maintaining a yard and that kind of thing. We call it aging in place. So they'll have places near services where they can move and they can still go to their same church, they can still see their friends and so forth. So we all acknowledged when we were helping with the planning here that retrofitting the single-family home neighborhoods was virtually impossible because they're fairly resilient and very politically strong. But changing these corridors is relatively easy, and we could get a consensus on that. So that's where they're going. And that's kind of how you're just based on our first look, that's kind of what you're doing too with your sort of town nodes. And that's what these are. These are also transit stations eventually, but these are like concentrations of services and jobs and so forth along those corridors. So that's kind of a strategy that a lot of cities are using. Up in Canada, in Toronto, they're using the same thing but on a much larger scale. So it works at all different scales. So this is just one of the corridors. And these are all the little nodes. Each one's a little different. Each one has a slightly different purpose, but the idea is that they provide those services, and each one has to be designed what we call in context. And the two nodes that we looked at, we just had a brief tour of them, but we already know that they're both unique, and so they'll need their own sort of tailor-made little plans for them. You can't talk about this without talking about land use. So mixed land use and density reduced my average and trip length by about 85%. So this guy, he's got it figured out, right? Like, he's got everything he needs within 3 feet. And so on the weekend, he doesn't have to move. For a city, and for a township, and for these little nodes, if we can provide what people need close by, they can access it conveniently. And so that's the idea of mixing land uses together.
And we found in places that have done this too, that the property values of the homes that are near those areas have been positively influenced by that.
Yeah, I'll show you an example in a moment where that was a huge issue. So along these arterials, which a lot of these nodes are located, there is a national discussion going on about the role of the arterial. And for the last 50 years, it's all about just moving the cars through. And that tends to take value from your community and export it to whatever further away, and it creates barriers. This is the evolving conception of what arterials report. Yes, there is an important car function to get folks through, but this is where most of your economy is located. In your township, most of your jobs, most of your services are located on these types of streets. And so accessing those services and the schools and so forth is really important. We want to be able to do that in a variety of ways, by car and hopefully by foot and by bicycle over time. Here is a single-family home community, and this is the mall on the arterial. This is the veneer of commercial property protecting the neighborhoods. And this mall, it was called the Winter Park Mall, it got out-malled by a newer mall further up the road, and all the tenants left and went to the new mall. And this only had one store left open, and the rest was vacant. And so we were hired to help the mall owner out-mall the new mall. And so he wanted better terrazzo floors, really cool sculptures, the best skylights and everything. And we said, let's not go there. Why don't we tear your mall down and start over? And of course, he didn't like that idea at all. But over time, he warmed up to it, and so we tore it down, and we rebuilt it with a network of streets. It's got the same stores as he would have had in his new mall, but it's in this sort of format. And you see this happening in cities all over Canada and the United States now. No one's building new malls anymore. They're building these these authentic kind of town center type thing. And this is kind of what you're doing kind of reminded me of this. And so there's a network of streets. And by the way, every community has an excuse for why you can't do good planning. In Canada, it was too much snow, it was too cold. Now here in this community, this is down in Winter Park, Florida, they said it's too hot. Nobody's going to walk because it's too hot. And so we were putting parking lots here, and folks had to walk around to the front doors and said nobody would ever do that. Interestingly, this is outperforming financially every other mall in Central Florida. And because apparently people will walk when it's hot, just like in Aspen, Colorado, and other places that are cold, Ottawa, Montreal, people walk outside. Anyway, this is what it looks like. So it's hugely successful.
Yeah, it looks hot.
Yeah, okay. So this was a roaring success. That's where it went from Winter Park Mall to Winter Park Village. And then we looked at what we call the super block to the north. And a super block is a block of land with no public or no effective public streets going through it. So you can only access it from the sides. And your nodes are filled with these super blocks. And whenever we see a super block, there's always a traffic issue on the corners. And as your township grows, you're going to notice these traffic problems on the corners get more and more severe. And so by getting a more robust street network, you can avoid those traffic issues on the corner and share the loads. And so this is the plan for that super block. It actually adds tremendous value to that land and actually solves the traffic issues as well and creates a walkable place. Now these neighborhoods around here, of course, were really concerned about the density that was coming in and the mix of land uses and the already bad traffic problems that existed. With the network, the traffic problems are getting solved. And after the experience with the first phase, these communities are welcoming this change because they actually use these stores and these services and these shops. And that's where this development, for example, here, that's where folks can move in when they don't want to maintain their yard anymore. So they're starting to see it as an asset, and that's why the property values are going up in the whole area. So this is the largest example I want to show you. This is north of Washington, D.C. in North Bethesda, if anyone's familiar with the D.C. area. And this is called the Rockville Pike. It's an enormous arterial road. And every time it got widened, more development happened further along, and it was always filled with traffic for those of you who didn't know the area. And this is what it looks like from a helicopter. And it looks much like your area with the mall and so forth. And all of these are independently parked and conceived developments. There's no we call it form-based code, but there's no relationship from one building to another building, so they don't add up to a place. It's just a whole bunch of independent places. And it was starting to choke on its own traffic, and so nothing could get developed. And so for 20 years, this place has been frozen in this sort of development era. And these neighborhoods and the people that own the property are starting to get concerned because their property values actually decline when there's no investment going in. The place is getting run down. The community's changing. They don't like the change. They don't like what's happening. And they can't do anything about it because the traffic doesn't allow anyone to redevelop. So this is just a couple of views of what it looks like on the street. So I don't know how long those ladies were standing there trying to cross, but I bet you they're still there. It's not friendly for people in wheelchairs. This is what it looks like from the sides. This could be anywhere in the country. And so, so these folks in color actually hired us to help the county with their planning. And of course, these neighbors were highly concerned about what was going on. And we did an X-ray of the bones, like we always do. And there's all kinds of problems with the network, which we solved in conjunction with the property owners. And with a more robust network, there's actually 36 lanes east-west as opposed to 26, and 30 north-south compared to 26. And there's so many more intersections processing, particularly left turns, that we can actually narrow a lot of these streets and make room for bike lanes and wide sidewalks and trees, and still handle all the traffic that this is bigger than your area, but tens of millions of square feet of new development will handle it. Not widening any of the roads, actually narrowing a number of them. And so that's what, when we model it, it distributes the loads like this. And even the big road that I showed you earlier is going to be a beautiful, complete street with, with 18-foot wide sidewalk with nice bike lanes and a transit facility down the center. So what used to be just a car conduit is now becomes the best address. And in American cities, in the history of American cities, the best addresses in the cities used to be the arterials. When I was a little kid, the arterials were the places where the theaters were, where the civic buildings were, all that stuff are up in arterial. I bet you there's people in this room who remember when the big streets in the cities were wonderful places. And that's what we want to recreate instead of just a car conduit. And so this is what it will be like on the sides. And this is the redevelopment that's happening in this context. And so the buildings are getting built and we're getting put in. And when we started this project, the neighborhoods were fighting us on it. There was no trust in the community. Everything that ever happened in the community turned out negatively. And over the course of about a year, the trust level grew, and there was a lineup like 100 people deep to support the project, from the business people to the neighborhoods to the bike groups to you name it. They saw the value in good planning and support of it. So this is the challenge. Like I said, I don't know the area very well, like you guys do. But I think if we learn about some of your concerns and some of the things you're thinking about, some of your visions, then we can make some informed suggestions for your consideration for your balance of your planning efforts. But I think that would be the good use of our couple of days. So we have this. We have two areas: the St. Islesworth area and the Ann Arbor Saline area to talk about. So why don't we put on the lights for a minute, and then we'll have some questions and answers as a group and a bit of discussion. And then for any of those who want to stay any longer to get into some more really detailed stuff, we'll hang around at the maps after. There's two sets of them, so everyone gets enough airtime and we can talk about it. Yes, sir.
What is the extent of your relationship with the township? I.e., how long are you in this process? Are you the typical consultant in and out? Are you in it for the long term contractually? Where are you?
So right now we have a contract for like 2.5 days or 3 days, and our contract is to look at the areas and then suggest ideas for you. And we hope we impress you so much that you will help us back. But I think that's
This is something we've never done. The township has never done this before. Obviously, we have planning consultants, we have Carla and Workman, we have planning staff as well. But again, like I said, this is the first time we're really starting to, again, keep our planning documents living and breathing, doing some of the responsive engagement that we want to do, and drill down to very specific cities, like I said before. And one of the things I was thinking about as you were doing the presentation, and I was remiss in not mentioning before, as you were sort of do your homework here, I hope you all spend some time with Ian and Hannah to have your voices heard, is I want you to sort of move away from the framework that you came to back in March to this context, which was like you're going to fight this big box development. I mean, that's one of the reasons that the township and I personally, myself, sort of took an aggressive position and was so sort of engaged with you in these communities, because obviously that's not something that we want either. That's not the type of development we want. So please don't come in with your defenses all built up thinking that's what's going to happen. We want this form-based node to be a positive change to the community. We want it to be things like Ian has sort of talked about here as well. So please bring some creative juices to the table. Think about what you want your community, your backyard, your front yard, your neighborhood, the node to generally look like, so we can build a better community in Pittsfield Township, neighborhood, state as well, as you mentioned, that's, another note that could bring in some positive, change to the township. So let's think about this in that sort of fashion.
Once the 3 days are over and we get all the wonderful ideas we have and we get a vision, you go, and we come back. What's the next step? Who begins the implementation of anything we might agree with followers? What happens? I don't want to see a dead end. I don't want to see somebody say, this is what we're going to do. What's the next step?
Absolutely, and those are critical things. I mean, you can plan what you want, but if the plan just sits on the shelf, it's not good. So those are things, like I've said, we really sort of relied on the master plan we currently have as a really good sort of guide and the parameters that we've established there and to guide the work that we've done in the township from all the art projects, the sidewalks, and non-motorized stuff that we've done is really driven by the vision that was put together back then. So to your point, the vision that we put together here through this process is hopefully going to guide what we do in the future in these places as change occurs.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how the implementation is working in South Bend? I feel like that's a good example of how people take next steps.
Okay, don't let me forget South Bend.
Okay.
I just want to echo that we don't have, I know there's been some quarrels about different development and so forth, and I'd really like not to get into that, but what would be useful though is what would be more useful for us for the next couple of days is how you would like to see things go in the future, what you actually want. Keep it kind of
You
positive.
represent us or the township. You represent us, the
I
owner
want you
or
to
the
talk
township.
as, from whatever your perspective is, if you're a business owner, or a developer, or a resident, or a mother, or whoever you are, that's who we want to hear
You
from.
represent us,
What
okay.
you want. And so that helps us. We're pretty astute at translating words into drawings. And whatever we draw isn't going to be the answer. But you can think of them as kind of starter ideas, just to get your juices going and the ideas flowing. So we'll get you some cool starting ideas based on what we hear. And then I think we'll get to all the questions, but I have to talk about South Bend too. Now South Bend, have you ever been to South Bend, Indiana? Go Irish, okay. We'll get some football rivalry going on. Yeah, that's where Notre Dame is, and Notre Dame's actually a couple miles outside of downtown. And downtown, South Bend has fallen on hard times. Half their buildings are now gone, again for surface parking lots. The transportation folks there sped up the roads to make them one way and exported all the value from inside the city to outside the city. And they have, as a result, they have some crime problems and other sorts of issues going on. And so we helped them envision the downtown as being successful. So we had a series of events like this where we met with folks and they expressed what they would like to see. And then we drew a plan based on what we heard. And that's actually getting implemented. It took about 8 months, and your process is probably, a year and a half in or something. But regardless of how long it is,
It's continual.
yeah, it's a continuous thing. And they are now, I think last week just opened up their first restored street from one-way to two-way. Probably in a couple of weeks they'll do their second one. They're investing in making the streets more accessible, which the business community is really pumped up about. The neighborhoods are excited because the value of the downtown's coming up, so their value will go up. A lot of those empty lots, they've been tearing down houses like a lot of places. Those houses can get replaced as people want to move downtown. So it's a very exciting time right now in South Bend. And it's because they have two ingredients. Success, we work in little places and big places, and I guess we're here because we have a pretty good track record, but the two ingredients for success, one is a vision, this collective imagination of where the place ought to be. And the second thing is a plan. A vision without a plan is a pipe dream. And we see some cities who have these great visions, but they don't do anything about it. But if you have a plan that's feasible and stageable, then you will actually achieve your vision. And that's what's happening in South Bend right now. Yes, sir.
I wonder how well your concept scales. seems to me you're talking about much larger developments than the 12 acres that we
Yes.
have over on Ann Arbor Saline Road.
It's very small.
I don't see the connection between an implementation and that small plot and what you described.
That's a good question. So the question is about scalability of these principles. So I tried to cover that with the Home Depot site, which is just a couple acres. But for example, in Howell, Michigan, small town, we helped them with their downtown plan. That's much smaller than here. So these same principles were applied there, and that place is doing well. Benton Harbor, Michigan, we helped them with their Main Street, again, applying the same principles. Mount Pleasant, Michigan, where Central Michigan University is, we're helping them with, in the same way, again, smaller community than your area. So I think it works at little places, even down to little places like Upperville, Aldi, and Middleburg. The biggest of those towns is 600.
But there's a lot of emphasis on this lateral to the streets, particularly the latter part of your presentation. It just doesn't
Yeah.
fit into.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, it's not a labyrinth, it's a legible network. And part of what we'd like to do too is look at some of your streets which kind of crisscross on each other and actually hobble your ability to grow properly. And I'll probably go into that more in the next talk because we didn't have time to deal with it the day after the tour. But there are things that work at even just a block or two that can help position you for success. And the reason we emphasize it is because everybody wants to talk about land use, about density and heights and mixes and but what no one likes to talk about is the street network because it's boring. And but the value of Savannah, for example, I showed Savannah, is in its subdivision of the land. Savannah was laid out in like 1753, before cars were invented. That network has held the value of that city for 250 years. They're on their 4th generation of buildings. It started as a single-family homes and then developed into, over time to what it is. None of those buildings are original in Savannah, but the subdivision of land is value for your community. For the streets are there for the long term, and you can change them now. So that's why I emphasize it because nobody talks about it, but it's very important. And you have a very kind of suburban superblock grid network, and unless you recognize that now and start focusing on it, you won't have plans that position you for the long run. And then you will get superblocks and you'll have endless traffic problems. Think of your favorite cities in the country for walkability. Like if you go on vacation to a city, where do you go? And I bet you, whatever you're imagining right now in terms of your favorite cities, they have a fine-grained block structure. Nobody goes to vacation to Irvine, California. Has anyone done that? No. But you're the first person to ever do